So I'm Debra Morrison, Principal of Empowered Retirement, and I am coming to you today in a season of uncertainty to talk about fear. And I learned so much about fear from my dear friend, and sadly my late friend, Dr. Susan Jeffers. And Susan wrote a number of New York Times best-selling books. Chief among them, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. Oops, I guess that's not working. So the point of this book is to get us through the fear. And I wanted to read directly from Susan's book because it is completely powerful. If everybody feels fear when approaching something totally new in life, and here we are, yet so many are out there doing it despite the fear, then we must conclude that fear is not the problem. Wow. But rather how we hold the fear. Now, she went on to develop a pain-power continuum. And at the end, in a moment, I'll give you the website to download her pain power continuum. Of course, it's found in her book. And I will share with you now the principles of this because Susan spent a life of research and doing to give us these nuggets that I, for one, have taken and completely run with, because who of us hasn't felt fear? As a matter of fact, fear is a good sign because the only time in a series of circumstances, typically, that we aren't feeling fear is when we're really not engaged in life, right? When we might be paralyzed. But fear sometimes can lead, if we're not holding the fear properly or in the most empowered manner, I should say that, because we choose, then we can become paralyzed. And so Susan has given us a continuum, and I draw this like this to give us hope, and I speak of this in my TEDx talk, and that is that she has on the one hand pain and the emotions underneath that segment of, and that end post, if you will, of her continuum, and on the other side, polar opposites, power. Now, not power over personal power, self-power. And so underneath the pain, we might resonate with some of these emotions, right? Helplessness, depression, and paralysis. But conversely, opposite that are the power emotions, choice, feelings, excitement, action. So if we're sitting feeling helpless, regardless of the matter, personal, financial, emotional, spiritual. If we're feeling helpless, Susan has given us the visual that we can inch our way across that continuum, and you'll see there's dotted lines along there, to choice. And if we're feeling depressed, we can inch our way towards, and I put like a mid-post in there, action, and then excitement at the opportunity. And if we're feeling paralyzed, we can inch our way over to action, because guess what the very best, quote unquote, cure for paralysis is? Doing something. Doing something eradicates that fear. We've all had examples of this. When you first got in the car to drive it yourself, there's some fear, there's some unknown. All of the firsts in life typically are fraught with a measure of fear. And so it's rather something we want to get comfortable with because it's a function of life. It's an indicator to us that here's an opportunity. Here's something perhaps new, perhaps old and we have forgotten it, or perhaps wholly new. Yet it needn't stop us. And as a matter of fact, it can propel us to personal empowerment and fulfillment. So we look inside again. Remember, all of the mystics have told us the answer is inside. And of course it is. And many of us entrust a larger entity, a power. In my case, I trust God and the impotent in the omnipotence of God and the ability for me to be given and for me to receive that knowledge that supersedes my human knowledge as learned and as actively curious as I am, and most of us are. So I reach for Susan's continuum, and I have it posted in my office in various locations. When I remember that I have a choice and I can take myself from this quote unquote side of the pain power continuum over into the powerful emotions and feelings. Now there might be some slippage, yes. And then we can come back and forth. That's why I like the continuum. It's not like, okay, we take up residency in the pain. We're always going to be helpless. Woe is me. Can't get out of it. Have no idea how to move forward. Well, the continuum is there. So I invite you to download that and commit it to memory. Commit it to your fiber. There's hope, ladies and gentlemen. There's always hope. And if you don't feel the hope within yourself, then reach out. Look out towards hope signals. Our mind is very much like a Google search. If we're like putting in hope in Google, right, it's going to take us to a whole bunch of hopeful scenarios. And if we're looking for more bad news, like what most of the media channels are filled with, then that's what we can expect there. So it's our responsibility to ourselves and the energy field around us, which is infinite ultimately, to choose life, to choose creativity. And all you need to do is look back in your life for times and situations in which you thought, how can I do this? How will I get through this? For many people, it's a grieving situation, the loss of an important person, a partner, or an important attribute, your job. I don't want to minimize any of these losses. I want to maximize, however, and elevate the remembrance and the memory and cement those memories as to the fact that you're still here, you're better because of it, and you have more resources on which to draw. So many of us forget that when we encourage like toddlers and stuff that are just learning to walk and they fall down, we say, oh, get up, Johnny. Oh, get up, Mary. Let's turn that right back on ourselves. Oh, get up, Deborah. Oh, get up, Jim. You can do it. You are doing it. And so it's that kind of taking uncertainty and morphing it into opportunity and hope that I want to speak of. Now, I've just started to talk about something that I actually coined, and it's the illusion of certainty bias, right? I'm a public speaker. I'm known as the expect the unexpected speaker. Why is that? Because I have 42 years of experience financial planning, and I have a rich family history. 9 brothers and sisters my dad had, right? I have a lot of life experience, and I have a great deal of professional knowledge about planning for the expected. It happens that my specialty is finance. But invariably, the unexpected comes in and snatches from our notion of control the certainty. And if we have a good plan B and plan C and probably some spirituality to help us through that uncertainty, it will be a lot easier. And if we don't, we'll build that. And as we fall from the memory of the certainty that we can handle whatever it is that is external to ourselves, because, you know, Abraham Lincoln said, happiness is an inside job. And he's right. Quadriplegics and paraplegics are some of the happiest people in the world. People who have survived the loss of a partner or a child. And they move through their grief. And they tell me, I'm a certified grief coach, they tell me, you know, Deborah, it just sounds a little weird, but the worst thing that ever happened to me ended up being the best thing. Why? They don't sweat the small stuff anymore. They value time. They hug the people they love. And so if that's the blessing, and it certainly is, I want to lift that up. I want to remind ourselves to hold this fear about these uncertainties with the assurance that ultimately we have the answer and we can choose the most creative of all of the notions that are jangling around within our brains. So again, I want us to start where we are, and I want us to figure out on that pain power continuum how we may be holding this fear or that fear. And I want us to take action, if you will, towards the choice of, I can handle this. That does not mean, ladies and gentlemen, I know every next step without fail. I think there's this notion in society that mistakes are bad. I mean, we were kind of taught that too, right? We laughed at kids in grammar school, they made a mistake. I mean, I still remember in second grade, I was reading and I read stomach instead of stomach. I still remember the kid's name, this first and last name of the kid that laughed the hardest and pointed at me. So I bring that up not because it has stifled me, but because, I mean, it's kind of funny. It's very funny. The issue is we can move beyond the notion that mistakes are bad. Mistakes are hurdles, and we'll be stronger after we create the solutions to the quote unquote mistakes. And so people come to me all the time and say, oh, I made this horrible mistake. And I say, okay, so tell me about it. And they tell me about it. And I say, well, what else? And they say, well, that's it. And I said, well, if that's it, if that's the mistake, we're fine, right? But sometimes you need someone outside yourself to give you that perspective, to allow you to pivot from the self-flagellation to, I did it, it didn't turn out so well. What do they say? If you don't get what you want, you get the experience. And now I have building blocks, or perhaps a coach or a professional, to help me either fix that mistake, if indeed it was, and or to move forward in a way that's more efficient, perhaps. So I think this illusion of certainty seems to have been fairly universal. And boy, has this pandemic cut through that. We have grown into new aspects of ourselves and our counties and our states and countries and world and planet. I, for one, am excited about it. Has there been uncertainty that's caused me some additional stress? You bet. And as soon as I feel the stress, I recognize it, because I think that's really important, to own our experience and to own our feelings. Because when we don't own our feelings and allow them to bubble up, if you will, guess what? They control us subconsciously. So picture yourself, you're in a swimming pool and you're just like keeping this inflated beach ball underneath the surface, because you don't want those feelings to come up. You don't want that uncertainty to come up. You don't want that fear to come up. You don't want that grief to come up. All your attention is keeping that beach ball underneath the water, underneath the water, underneath the water. You're not even enjoying the pool. You might get distracted, and I hope to God you are distracted, and you look away, and whoop, all of a sudden that inflated beach ball pops up. And now you settle into the peace of not having to divert valuable energy towards keeping that down. It popped up. Deal with it. So I know that this is not the kind of message that maybe you were thinking you were going to hear from a financial advisor. And yet I have two assets in life, and most of us do: time and health. All the money in the world can't replace time and health. They can maybe assist us in extending our lives and improving our health. And I hope we use our monies toward that end. But if this circumstance of a lot of uncertainty covering individuals and companies and countries and the globe has taught us anything, I think it has taught us that life itself is precious. And the hours in our life are valuable. And I want to invite us to do our level best to bring any of these subconscious fears, all of this chatterbox stuff that's otherwise been automatically ruling us, to the conscious, because now we can deal with them, and take affirmative action towards moving ourselves to that personal power side of Dr. Susan Jeffers' pain power continuum. Now, it helps to remember that neurolinguistic programming has taught us that intellect is high and emotions are low. They're on like this inverse teeter-totter relationship, right? And so when we're very emotionally charged with something, it's not the time to devise the intellectual solutions, if you will, those next steps. We want to, again, let that beach ball out, let our emotions out, and now we say, okay, we've emoted, and now we'll bring our intellect into focus, and we'll devise steps. Plan A, Plan B, Plan C. So invariably, life is this confluence between emotion and intellect, and yet it's really powerful to separate those out and to be knowledgeable that when we're in a highly emotionally charged state, which sometimes fear has caused us to be before we're conscious of it, then we're not likely to get that intuition or the factual aspect of our brain fired up. We need to quell this, quiet this, to enliven this. And I love that word enliven because it is going to give us more life. So ultimately, we will stand in our power amidst the grief, choosing to hold the grief because there's been a lot of loss, loss of what we knew or thought we knew, loss of routine, loss of pattern. Maybe this is the universe's way of saying, pattern interrupt. How will we pivot and change our perspective in moving forward? So I want us to remember that the best way out is always through. And of course, that is a Helen Keller quote. We cannot control ultimate outcomes. We lay our plan. Somebody said, God kind of laughs at it sometimes. I'm not saying planning is bad. Believe me, I am a real advocate of planning. And yet, when life and uncertainty injects itself as it will, in small or large degrees, I want us to have built up within ourselves a knowledge and a belief that we have a choice and we can move from our paralysis and fear over the continuum into personal power. And then with that increased sense of self-worth and capability and creativity, we imagine our next step, our next chapter. I invite us to do this and then lead others to do this too. And creatively and collectively, we will bring about a most empowered, enlivened, filled with energy, a new future. Unless we get caught up about the temporary downturn of the markets, if you will. I've been a student of the markets my whole life, and certainly professionally involved 42 years. And I can assure you that the market cycles, and historically, it has always come back and superseded the levels prior. So you needn't worry, and worry is the most useless emotion in the world anyway. You needn't focus on, will the market come back? Yeah, the market will come back. Where will you be emotionally? Because you can always create more money. And I'm off to say, if money can solve it, it's not a problem. So my prayer today is for each of us to recognize the loss, the grief, and sometimes that fear that makes us tremble, and to lift that up such that we can now take steps across that continuum towards more personal power. We can do it. We are doing it. And I invite you to come to our website, Empowered Retirement. That's EMPOWERED just like the moniker, .com/resources to get a copy of Dr. Jeffers' Pain Power Continuum. And there are a bunch of freebies on there that hopefully can give you some little footholds of assurance in any uncertain times. And frankly, all times are uncertain. It's our responsibility to choose not necessarily certainty, resilience, creativity, and responsiveness, because our lives, our futures, and those who depend upon us depend on nothing short of it. God bless. We will get through this. We are getting through this. Namaste.